Lofi Poli Sci coming at you with a bit of a different style Monday episode. No box office, no music, no weather, no story time. Michael Pickering here breaking down the world that is our news. You see, we deal in the real, the raw, the messy as can be of what's going on in the world today. But a lot of that conversation is most certainly helped or hindered by what media across the planet decide to focus on any given day. The stories they decide to tell us that are the most important to watch. And so much of these past few weeks, well, you see, well, let's just get to that in a moment. All right, yeah, I'm going to go off in a bit, but let's wait for that. Today, we're going to do what we call meta-analysis of international news content. We're looking into 100 international or world news stories across 10 media platforms to see what media are focusing on today and to see what kind of global news diversity we're really getting at the moment. So let's lay out our methodology so everyone knows exactly how we do this, so we can know exactly what we can say from our data, and perhaps more importantly, what we can't say from our data. So this is how we do it. I've chosen 10 media platforms, and I'm going to look at the top 10 world news stories from each platform, giving us a total of 100 global news stories. I'll then compile the data and see which stories are mentioned the most, and that will give us an overview of global news diversity. And really important here, at that specific moment in time only. So I've queued up all 10 sites to visit each of them at the exact moment in time and see what we get. And I do this on a computer so that I can actually look at all websites at the same time. So it's the web browser version of the media outlets. And I'm doing this on Sunday, February 13th at 10:40 a.m. And I give you the exact time because, well, these sites can get updated at any moment. So by the time you listen to this on Monday, or Tuesday, or next week, I know some of you out there don't listen all the time, but I give you the timestamp, so you know exactly when we see these stories and where. And our 10 media platforms are the BBC, the Associated Press, aka AP, Reuters, NPR, Fox, CNN, Washington Post, New York Times, Google News, World News. All of them, the world or international sections. And to really quickly note about the inclusion of Google and Yahoo, I do this because both are news aggregator websites and a lot of people view news from both of those sources. Thus, relevant media platforms, even if they don't create their own news content, people still consume their content on their platforms, and therefore, they greatly influence the international news people see. But now let's go ahead and dive into it. What did we see when we looked at the top 10 news stories on 10 different media platforms at the exact same time to see 100 international news stories and the diversity of news coverage on this Sunday, the 13th of February at 10:40 a.m.? We found 34 different global news stories out of 100 total across all 10 platforms. Out of 100 global news stories, 29 were about Ukraine and the conflict with Russia and the West. 24 were about COVID-19, and of that, 15 about Canada in particular. 6 were about the Olympics, 6 were about Afghanistan, 4 were about China, and all other stories were mentioned only once or twice. So, there's a lot of ways we can take this, but I'll give you the short version of where we're going with it. Out of 100 international news stories across 10 of the most popular platforms in the United States, 53 of them were about one of two topics, and 69 of them were only about 5 topics. Ukraine and COVID are dominating the international sections of U.S. media platforms at the moment, and almost everything else is being tossed to the side. Over 1 in 2 stories across these platforms are just about COVID and Ukraine. And even if we look at the fact that there's a total of 34 different stories out of these 100, there's about 200 countries in the world with things going down in all of them. But all we're hearing about, all we're seeing and reading, is about just a handful of things. COVID and Ukraine. And this, my friends, is the power of agenda setting that media have. The ability to inundate us with specific amounts and with specific stories, to the extent that no matter where we go in the mainstream, we see the same thing, and thus believe what they tell us is important. Well, people believe it because seeing is believing. Simple as that. Agenda setting, people. It's no joke. It's real. Remember it. And I'll be honest, Lo-Fi listeners, this kind of shit pisses me off to no end. As a political scientist, as a person who cares about what's going on in the world today, this is the kind of shit that keeps us ignorant of everything that's happening. Because what are we supposed to believe? That right now on this Sunday, February 13th, that the only things happening across the planet are either Ukraine-related or COVID-related or Olympics-related? Please. But I will tell you one silver lining of it all. All of this that we're seeing right here, right now, reminds me of the very purpose for which Lofi Poli Sci was born. It reminds me what we do is still as relevant as ever, even after almost 2 years. We started this thing of ours because everyone was just focused on COVID news 2 years ago, because we knew there was still so much more going on out there that was simply getting ignored. We started this thing 2 years ago because we in the We That We Be care about our people all around the world. And we want to know what's going down with them. And what we do matters. And who we are, well, that matters too. And that's a brief snapshot of what's going on in the world today. Talk to you tomorrow, Lo-Fi listeners. Pickering, signing off.